and welcome to Mad's Tea Party, the channel run by a girl who does not drink tea. I'm Madison, and today I'm going to be doing part 2 of my Disney College Program story. So if you missed part 1, definitely watch that first. I will leave it linked in the description and probably also have it up here somewhere. And that one, I basically just talked about, you know, my acceptance process, my job itself, and in this one, I'm going to be talking about how my college program ended. So, as everybody knows, there was a pandemic and it shut Disney World down for like 3 months. That's where this is going. I was Spring Advantage 2020 merchandise, and it was honestly one of the most difficult things that's ever happened to me. I know a lot of people lost a lot more during the pandemic. I was lucky enough that I didn't lose any loved ones and I had somewhere to go. I was one of the lucky ones. Just for me, I had never faced heartbreak like that, ever. Looking back on it, I'm healing and I'm okay now, but at the time, it was one of the most difficult things that's ever happened to me. So there's this pandemic going around and it's coming over from China, and everyone's like, oh, Shanghai Disney's closed, you know, Hong Kong Disney's closing, what, you know, who's gonna be next? And I was the kind of person who was like, oh, well, we're not gonna shut down, so I'm not worried about it. I was wrong. Then Disneyland announces, hey, we're gonna be closing for 2 weeks. And then Disney World announces, hey, we're gonna be closing for 2 weeks. And I get this news while I'm at work. So that kind of sucked. I had a confectionery shift that night, and I go in the break room and everyone's freaking out and I'm like, what the heck is going on? So it was pretty rough. Everyone was freaking out, and I am usually pretty calm in a crisis. So I didn't really freak out or anything. I was like, look, it's just 2 weeks, you know, we're gonna be fine. We have 2 weeks off. I'm gonna go visit my family. You know, it'll be a nice little break, because in the college program, you can't really get time off. You know, you are there for the time that they tell you to be there, and to get a day off is a rarity. You know, you can't really request time off as a CP. I was very calm, and a lot of other people were like crying, and they, you know, they didn't know how to process it. And, you know, there were a lot of people from around the world in my location. I had a lot of Australians, I had a Scottish girl, plenty of people that weren't from America. Their reactions to it were, you know, things that I didn't even think about. So I remember at the end of the night, we closed up the shops, and then they pulled everyone into the Art of Disney store, the Main Street Cinema. And we were all standing there, and they were like, hey, we didn't know any of this before you guys did. They told the media at the same time they told the cast members, so that there were no leaks either way. That was a true community moment at Disney. I wasn't there for long enough to truly feel like I knew the people there, or that I belonged, really. So it was nice to have that moment. I always felt like a bit of just a number at Disney, you know, another worker bee that's just gonna be there when they need to be there. And honestly, I still kind of feel like that's the way that it is at Disney. Yeah, we have this wonderful meeting, but all of the international people were losing their minds. They were like, I'm gonna lose my visa, I'm gonna get deported. And, you know, they reassured them, no, you're not gonna get deported, like you're fine, you know, you're gonna be okay to stay here. And at the time that was true, but that turned out to also be false. A lot of people were also like, you know, they're just gonna get rid of the CPs. I was like, they need us. They literally can't operate the parks without us. And if you worked at Disney pre-COVID, you know the way it was. Like, the CPs carried a lot of the burden of the park on their back. There were a ton of CPs. There were over 10,000 of us. And so we made up a big population of Disney World's workforce here. So I was like, well, no, they're not gonna lay us off. Again, I was totally incorrect, but honestly, who could have foreseen? I go home that night and I talk to my roommate Amanda, and, you know, we sit there and we just kind of calm each other down, because so much had been happening during our college program, that it was just like the world was falling apart and we just had to make sense of it. We actually started a list of things that went wrong at the Disney parks in 2020, and it was a pretty long list. So it was a pretty chaotic time anyway, but you know, this was the biggest thing. So we finally came to peace with it. We decided, you know, it's gonna be okay. And then we get the big news. So I was at work. I had another shift in confectionery. I was kitchen this day, so I was backstage. I didn't have to deal with guests or anything, luckily enough. It was honestly a pretty chill day, not bad. And I go out onto the floor, and when I come back, everyone is falling apart. I was very confused at first because I was like, okay, I don't get it. And I go up to one of the people who's just like sobbing, and I say like, dude, what's going on? And they're like, the program's over. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they were like, it's canceled, we're done. And I thought that it was just kind of a rumor. But you know, I was going to my break. So I go down to the break room, and while I'm like on my way, I see this email that basically said, we're suspending all the programs, you've got 3 days to leave. It took me a minute to like fully realize what was happening. I stood in the utilidor, and at first I kind of was like forcing myself to feel sad, because I was like, no, this is serious, like you need to be more sad than this. And then as the reality of it actually hit me, I just started crying and didn't stop. It was really rough. I was crying in the middle of the utilidor, and people kept coming up to me and being like, are you okay? And I was like, no, I'm not okay. This has been my dream since middle school. And I'd had the realization midway through my program, I had made my final decision like the week before the announcement came out that I was gonna stay in Florida. I was done in my hometown. I was ready to move on. And as soon as I made that decision, it just all fell apart. So now, not only is this my dream since middle school, it was also my career path and my education path. And that was the worst loss. I've changed paths so many times since then. You know, I've gone from like, oh, I'm staying back home, to no, I'm doing the Disney College program and I'm staying in Florida forever, to I guess I'm coming back home and finishing school, to nope, I'm back in Florida. So it's been kind of a lot, and it's all because of the program. Like, this never would have happened otherwise. And I mean that in like a good way and a bad way. I couldn't stop crying for honestly days. It was really rough. I didn't really work much at all for the rest of the day, and none of the CPs did. Me and one of the Australian girls, we went out into Main Street because we were like, well, we're getting fired anyway, so we might as well watch the parade. And we watched Festival of Fantasy. And it was just weird. The people that were international didn't know if they would be able to get home, how they would be able to get home. I mean, it was just kind of a lot. We had 3 days. I had to pack up everything myself. I tried applying for the fall program. Obviously the fall program didn't happen, so I didn't get accepted for that either. My managers kept telling me that, you know, there's more important things than working for Disney. And I was like, you know, you can shut up. You still have a job. And honestly, a lot of them I don't think quite understood. You know, for a lot of us, this was not just a job. You know, some of my roommates were just there for the college credit, for, you know, the internship, resume building thing. Then other people, you know, Disney was their life, and taking that away was, you know, a big deal for them. It just felt really condescending. Looking back on it, I think they made the right decision. But at the time, I was so outraged because COVID was such a small issue at the time. It hadn't quite turned into what it became. Packing up everything that I had just gotten used to in 3 days, and, you know, moving back home was just, it was rough. The night that I got the news, I put in for an ER, and they were able to give it to me around 6 p.m. I had planned to go to the park that day, so I had a change of clothes in my locker downstairs, and I changed clothes and I went into the park with one of my coworkers. The camaraderie between the cast members was just unmatched, honestly. They knew if you were a CP, and you could look at a cast member and just know if they were a CP. It was a weird energy. It just felt like the park was grieving. And in a way it was. Those last few days before the closure were weird. And genuinely, I think anyone that was there will tell you the same thing. Like, the energy was just weird. It was off. It did not feel like normal Disney World. When you're walking around and you see the smiling cast members, just remember that it's the cast members who make it the happiest place. Because in those days where the cast members were uncertain and they were, you know, so sad and grieving the loss of, you know, this place that they loved, it changed. It was a different place. And a couple of my friends from back home were in town, and they happened to be in Magic Kingdom that day, so I was able to meet up with them during the fireworks. Dude, I'm like getting, I'm like getting emotional over this right now just talking about it, which is insane, because it was over a year ago. I've never cried that much in my life. So it's the final day the park's being open now, and I had one final shift. It was at confectionery, and most people called out. They did not go back in. But I did, because it was important to me that I left the company on a good note. It was very important that I was eligible for rehire. So I went to work, I was on time, I left on time, I didn't mention anything, I didn't complain, because I'd done plenty of that the day before. Before I went into work that day, I went into the park. They were letting CPs to the front of the line to meet Mickey, so I met Mickey and I cried my eyes out. I had my friends with me, and I thought that that was the end of our friendship too. Of course it wasn't. It all turned out okay. I didn't expect to get this emotional talking about my college program this far out, and it feels stupid to cry over it, because as far as losses go, it's a pretty minor one. But I had my last shift, and they were kind enough to let the CPs who came to work that day go and watch Happily Ever After from backstage. We all sat out there and watched the last Happily Ever After together. And a lot of the CPs who weren't scheduled that day and, you know, weren't supposed to come in, they came back there and they watched with us. And a lot of people had already gone home. You know, a lot of people got the news and just immediately left. They packed up and left. They were like, screw this, I'm going home. It's gonna mess up my makeup. One funny thing about my final shift. So, I was in confectionery, like I said, I was front of house this time. So after fireworks, we pretty much had to get right back to work. It was like, you know, you have a little bit of lull during the actual show, and then you've just gotta get right back to work because that's when it's gonna get slammed. And they had me on case line. So if you've ever been to the confectionery, you know, like you come in and there's like the bakery case. So I was checking out the bakery case. I was the person ringing people up. And this woman comes up to me on my very last day, knowing probably full well, you know, what was happening in the parks, because pretty much everyone that was there those days, obviously they knew that the parks were closing, and she might not have known that the CPs were all getting laid off, but she was an annual pass holder, so I feel like she probably knew. But she comes up to the counter and she's like, "Why don't you have this apple?" And I'm like, I don't know, like, I'm not in kitchen today. It's not my job. And I didn't say that, of course. You gotta pixie dust everything when you're at Disney. So I was like, "I'm sorry." And she's like, "You need to put a sign out that says exactly what treats you have." And we do have a menu, but it just says like, you know, assorted cupcakes, assorted apples. So it's like, she must have wanted a really specific apple. And she was like yelling at me on my very last day, like within the last hour or two of me working at Disney. This woman decided it was a good idea to yell at the CP who just got laid off. And honestly, I didn't even say anything. I didn't do my customer service. "Oh, I'm so sorry about that." I didn't say, "Look, ma'am, I just got fired, leave me alone." I didn't say anything. I just stared at her until she realized how stupid she sounded. And then she walked away, probably to complain about me. But whatever. That was my last day working at Disney. And I'm glad that I went in. God, if I had not gone in, that would probably rank as one of my biggest regrets. You know, I don't really talk to anyone from Main Street East anymore because I was not there long enough. Yeah, I was only there for 6 weeks, but yeah. So I hope everyone at Main Street East, or that was at Main Street East, is doing great. You know, I hope you all came out of the pandemic happy and healthy. Would I work for Disney again? Yes. But do I trust them anymore? No. I understand the interns are like the first thing to go, right? Because technically we're on like forever probation. Their business choices actually made sense. It just hurt. And it made me feel even more so like I was just a number to them. I didn't get the college program experience, the talent show, and a lot of the bingo nights and trivia nights and stuff like that. Like, I just didn't get it. It just didn't happen for me. And I thought, you know, I'll just do another college program and then I'll get those experiences. But now I'm just at the point where like, yeah, but they could fire me again. You know, they could lay everybody off again. And I just don't trust them anymore. I didn't apply for the college program when it came back. I didn't apply for part-time or full-time at Disney when it came back. I still love Disney, obviously. I moved back down here. So clearly Orlando's where I wanna be, Disney's where I wanna be. So no hard feelings toward the company itself. I hated Josh D'Amaro for a very long time and I held it against him personally. I can't believe I didn't mention this sooner, but on the very last night, right before the fireworks, Josh D'Amaro came to the Main Street East cast members as we were about to watch the fireworks. And, you know, we all took pictures together and I don't have the picture, which I wish I did. He basically said, "I'm so sorry, guys. This is my fault. This was my decision. I was the one who decided to send you guys home." And he didn't cry with us, so he didn't care as much as he did for the Disneyland cast members, I guess. Looking back on it, it makes me respect him. Anyway, yeah, I met Josh D'Amaro, so that was cool. The few days after, like in between the park closure and me actually going home, I could have gone home, but I was like, you can't kick me out of Orlando. I'm not leaving my apartment until you make me. So I didn't. And I also met recruiter Christy there, and she's got a pretty good Twitter following, so that was pretty exciting too. In those few days between the park closure and me going home, I spent most of my time with Amanda, my roommate, and we did like all the things. Like, we decided like, we're gonna do everything that we can do at Disney right now. So we show up at Wilderness Lodge and we got reservations for Artist Point. So we were gonna go to the character dining and they were like socially distanced. Like, they didn't come around and give us autographs, but like we still saw them and it was cool. I would go back though, just to actually meet the Evil Queen because I didn't get to interact with her. We rented a boat and we drove it all the way over to Magic Kingdom. We saw the empty park on the day after, like the day that it closed. And it was really weird, it was really trippy. And we drove around and we saw Discovery Island from a distance, of course. It was really awesome. So we did that, we went to Artist Point, and we went over to the Polynesian, and I had my first meal at Ohana, and it was amazing. So honestly, we made the most of it. And looking back on my program, I wouldn't take it back. Like, could it have saved me a lot of heartbreak? Yes. But I wouldn't go back on it, just because I don't think I would be where I am today without it. I guess, thanks Mickey. So that's the tragic story of my Disney college program. That probably was very anticlimactic for you. Honestly, this is just like a therapy session for me more than anything. So like, if you got anything out of this at all, congratulations. I put out new videos every Friday. If you're interested, go ahead and subscribe. That's about that. So I will see you guys next week. Bye.